The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.
In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, we have a right to life, we have a right to defend life.
This legislation is centered on meeting the needs of Idaho families.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
I feel like we're back to an unappointed board that gets to decide who is essential and who is non-essential.
The courts have long held that our ability to transfer title on real property benefits society as a whole.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
We need to start making Idaho first. We need to start making America first.
For me, it's about a couple things. It's about food security, it's about national security, and it's about preserving American exceptionalism.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
Welcome, everybody. Idaho Signal is on the air. It is October 22nd, 2024. I am Matt Edwards. Welcome to the program. We are we are just 13 days or 14 days if you count today till November 5th for the November 5th election. So there's a lot going on across the country, but right here in Idaho, one of the biggest issues on the ballot is Prop 1, the ballot initiative that would institute a jungle primary along with ranked choice voting. And so we're gonna continue to follow this story and bring to you as much information as we can, including a lot of the lies, a lot of the deception that is being thrown out there by the yes on one people. And so we've got some great guests we're going to pull up here in a moment here. But we do want to first at least encourage you to early vote, because early voting has started last week in certain counties. Yesterday it started in more counties across the state. And scrolling here at the bottom, you'll see all the counties where you can go and early vote in person. Go to your county's website to be sure to find out exactly where you need to show up for early voting. Sometimes it's at the election office. Sometimes it could be at a library if you're in a larger county like Ada. But please make sure you go to your county's website to find out. There are also certain counties that don't have necessarily in-person early voting, but you can go in and drop off your absentee ballot. So if you are somebody who has an absentee ballot and it's sitting on your kitchen table, you need to return that ballot and get in on this historic election. Okay, folks, let's bring in our panel here. I'm very pleased to bring in some great individuals. We have Brian Allman, of course, Representative Julian Young, and Attorney Kate Hartley. And folks, it's great to have you because we've got some folks from the north, we got the east, we got the Treasure Valley. So I feel like we're covering all of Idaho right here with this this great panel. So folks, let's Representative Young, I kind of want to throw it to you first because you were part of the legislature that actually voted to outlaw ranked choice voting. And here it is coming back as what would be a constitutional amendment, something, or it would be embedded in our constitution that we could have ranked choice voting. Can you kind of walk us through why originally you voted against ranked choice voting and what your position now is on Prop 1?
For sure. Thanks, Matt. And, not only did I vote against ranked choice voting, but I think it's important for voters to know that this was a partisan vote. in the Idaho legislature, both in the House and in the Senate. It was pretty much straight down party lines. All Republicans were opposed to ranked choice voting. All Democrats were supportive of ranked choice voting. So I'd like you to just tuck that away in your back pocket and keep that in mind as we continue our conversation today. Ranked choice voting undermines some fundamental principles that have undergirded our American election system for a long time, primarily one man, one vote. And under a system of one man, one vote, everyone has an equal say. It's clear cut. And at the end of the day, everyone knows why the decision was made the way that it was made. And ranked choice voting creates so many complications by doing that. And one that I'd like to talk a little more about probably later on as we go along is primarily what happens to our ability to audit and ensure the integrity of our elections. And I know I've heard a lot of different arguments against Proposition 1, but I think this is one that maybe isn't getting as much attention as it deserves. And I think it's a really big deal.
Yeah. I was going through that process just earlier, talking with some of our producers on how you would audit a ranked choice voting system. And I have an example of a ballot here that I kind of want to show you and ask you folks about this. But I want to turn to Kate Hartley real quick. Kate, you have a unique story that I think is, I don't think it is unique, unfortunately. You have a story to tell that happened to you. And I kind of wanted to hear, I wanted to let the voters hear this, because there's probably a lot of folks out here that may have heard something similar, and it may spark, it may turn the gears in their head a little bit when thinking about how to approach this. So why don't you share with us a little bit about what happened to you?
Sure, Matt. Thanks for having me today. I was actually at my local farmers markets a couple of weeks ago, and there were a number of people in Yes on Prop 1 shirts running people down, trying to talk to them about Prop 1. And I actually approached a woman who was doing this and just wanted to honestly hear what they were telling people, right? So I went up to her, obviously, pretended that I was completely ignorant to the issue. And she went on, and I didn't interrupt, and I just listened to everything she had to say. And the one thing that caught my interest the most is that she kept saying that under our current system, that all of these, government officials were appointed and they were not elected. And so I let her finish, and at the end I said, that's pretty concerning, right? That all these people are appointed, and they're not necessarily subject to the citizens, to the people who would have typically elected them. I said, can you give me an example of someone either locally or statewide that was appointed, right? And she provided the example locally up here in Kootenai County with the Community Library Network, and went on to say that the past two people who were recently elected last year to the library board for Community Library Network were appointed. And I said, well, actually, I remember there being an election, and these people were elected by the people. And she said, well, when I say appointed, I just mean that, people were lying about the incumbent trustees, and the central committee is telling people who to vote for. And I said, but you used the word appointed, which means that someone was placed in office without being elected to office. And I said, that's a lie, right? That there was an election, and you can't tell me that they were appointed just because you don't like the outcome of that election. And so I started telling people about this, because that's, again, if you are an uninformed person hearing this, that would be concerning, right? It would have been concerning to me to think, wow, these people making all these decisions were not elected, and therefore are not subject to what the people of this county or of the state or whatever it is, they're not subject to the desires of the citizens. So I was very taken. And of course, then she stopped talking to me once I started asking questions. And pointing out facts, right? They hate when we point out facts, right?
Yes, yes. Brian, let me turn to you because you in fact are a library trustee, if I'm not correct. And were you appointed to your position, sir?
Actually, I was, and there's a reason for that. Some libraries are run by the cities, and other libraries are their independent taxing districts. So Community Library Network is an independent taxing district, and therefore, just like your school board or your sewer board or your mosquito abatement board, those people, the trustees, are elected. In my case, since it's a subdivision of the city of Eagle, we are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council.
Okay, fair enough. All right. As I wipe egg off my face for that one. Well, let me, Julian, I want to bring you back here because you mentioned talking about auditing, and I know you personally just went through an audit or a recount, so to speak, in your primary election, and so you're intimately know how this process works, and what can you compare what you witnessed to what you think might have to happen in a ranked choice voting recount?
Sure.
Or audit?
Sure. So, Matt, not only have I personally experienced what it's like to go through a recount and watch that audit process kind of on pins and needles, I actually carried our post-election audit bill and some revisions to that. And so I've worked closely with the Secretary of State. I've been in a lot of committee meetings discussing post-election audits and how we do them in a way that really ensures election integrity. And, one of the things that kind of surprised me in the case of my recount, my audit, was it took 2 days and dozens of people. The sheriff's department was involved in making sure that the ballots were secured. It was hours upon hours of an entire staff of people in 2 counties to get this done. But what made it powerful was the fact that my opponent and myself, who were just 2 votes apart, were both able to stand in the room. We were each able to have another individual represent us, and we were able to watch the whole thing as a live person put a paper ballot in front of us, examined the ballot, and called the vote. And then someone else recorded it. Everything was double checked. Everything was transparent. And at the end of the day, whether you liked the result or whether you didn't like the result, everyone could be comfortable that what was decided actually matched a physical paper ballot and a stack of them that you could all see. If you have a ranked choice voting system, in my case, there are 2 counties involved. So I'm not even sure how this works, because right now you tabulate the vote in each county and then you just add it up and you have a total. Well, with a ranked choice voting system, you actually have to put all of the ballots for that particular race together to start with before you can eliminate the lowest candidate in that round and recast those votes for another person. I don't know how you do that when you have paper ballots that have races that have different geographic areas. Wow. You couldn't even tabulate all the votes in one location and then put them together, and you can't do it on the county level. Are we talking about a whole new level of bureaucracy here just to calculate state races that overlap into different counties? I don't know how else you do that. And once you get it done, if you ever had to do a recount like we had in my case, you wouldn't only have to count those votes once. You'd have to count them multiple times, and you'd have to track, well, where did that person's vote go when the lowest vote getter was kicked out of the round? And you'd have to do that multiple times. That is so incredibly intensive in terms of time and resources. I can't imagine that it would ever be done by real people.
Yeah.
Only would be with a computer.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I want to present you guys with a scenario here. And Kate, you're a First Amendment lawyer, and I would think the disenfranchisement of a voter is something that concerns you greatly, as well as all of us here do. But I want to bring up a picture of a ballot here. And I'm going to explain it to what everybody is. Now, let's say that there's these 4 people on the ballot, and this person chose Bruce to be their number 1 choice. And then for their second choice, they actually marked off 2 people. They marked off Chucky and Lizzie for their second choice. The third choice they left blank, but they gave Freddie as their fourth choice. So I have a question for all three of you here, and I want to go to Kate first. If the rules state, if a ballot is wrong or incomplete or whatever the case may be, that it may be exhausted, it may be thrown out and not counted. But if we're just doing the first round voting, and this person clearly has a first choice, but the second choice would be an error because there's two people selected as second choice. Would you throw this ballot out, or would you count this ballot? And let me continue, because what if Bruce loses the first round and is kicked out? Then would you go to the second choice that this person has and say, well, there's two people here, so that we can't determine who the voter intended to vote for, so we're going to throw it out. But let's say good old Lizzie actually makes it to one of the final rounds. Do you get to bring this vote back and have this vote count because this person actually did choose Lizzie as their fourth person? I mean, do you see what I'm getting at here? When is this valid? When is it not? Is this an honest mistake, or is this a on purpose mistake? I mean, I might have two choices for second place that I'd be perfectly happy with. This is the scenario we're running into, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would think that they would throw that out from the beginning because it's, quote, in error. And you make a great point. It's not only confusing, but how many people are going to, quote, make a mistake and have their vote not count? And again, people, especially people who've been voting for decades, right? They're not used to this. They know how to go in and pick their candidate, and that's who they're voting for. This is confusing. There are going to be so many people who are confused, and you make a great point that many of their votes are just going to be completely thrown out because they made a mistake. They don't understand it, as is going to be common, I believe.
Yeah. And Brian, can you speak to this on an ideological level, like in terms of voting, the whole notion of voting for somebody rather than do a voting process where we're ranking people? I mean, isn't there something to be said about actually being for somebody or for something for a particular office?
It's kind of ironic the way they've set up Prop 1 with the top 4 jungle primary in the primary and then the ranked choice voting in the general, because the primary ballot's going to be 30, 40, 50 people long as everybody wants to get in on the action, and you have to pick one. Not as if you have time to investigate all other 39 or however many more. But then come the general election, you're going to be given 4 and told you have to pick all 4 of them, but you have to rank them in order. It's really weird. It's a lot different than our voting systems have ever been in the past. One man, one vote for one person. You're casting your vote for the person you think is best qualified for this job. Now they're going to ask you to pick 4. You look at our presidential election ballot here in Idaho, and you've got obviously Trump and Harris, the major party candidates, but then RFK is still on the ballot. Jill Stein is on the ballot. And then there's a whole bunch of other people that they just sign up to be on the presidential ballot to get their name out there. Imagine having to rank 1 through 4 on that. How do you start picking that? And there is kind of a moral component to, being forced to vote for somebody that you don't really support. But even more than that, you start getting into the perverse incentives where say you have two strongly ideological candidates on the left and the right, but then you have a third candidate who's really kept their positions under wraps. They don't take a hard stand on anything, and they just go to all the voters and say, I know I'm not your first choice, but maybe I can be your second choice. And they go to voters on the other side and say the same thing. Can I be your second choice? And then you end up with someone who, I think the proponents of Prop 1 would say is more representative, but I don't think that's the case. It's just somebody who avoided taking a strong stand and ends up being everybody's second choice, which I don't think is helpful to our republic.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my question to you, Representative, is does this just encourage people to say, hey, just be everybody's second choice and not really take a stand on anything and just be a candidate that people can say, I could live with that person? I mean, is that how you would like to run your campaign?
Right. It definitely discourages people from taking a strong position. The other thing that I think is interesting is that when you look at the way our system's set up right now, it really is a competition between some primary political philosophies. You've got one Republican, you've got one Democrat, you might have a Constitution Party candidate. But when you look at the ballot, you look at the party and you're saying, I like this set of ideas and I like that set of ideas, or I don't like that one. It totally changes things when it's a competition between people and there's no more clear-cut lines between different philosophies, or maybe more blurry lines than we already have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate, you know, when we go through the numbers, and I mean, this is for each of you as well. They talk about that this actually helps ensure that a majority of people are, I guess, have voted or are happy with the outcome. But when you're tossing away ballots and exhausting ballots, how can you claim that this is a majority of the people that showed up on that day to vote? Can you?
I don't think you can. And similar to what I said before, it's so confusing that, I mean, how are you to even know what a majority of people are thinking, right? I think there's so much confusion in it that people are not even going to actually put down probably what they believe or what they want. I think there's going to be a lot of that. And so I absolutely don't think that it would be representative of a majority at all.
Yeah, and Brian, you've been keeping track of who's for Prop 1, who's against Prop 1, and I mean, real quickly, in terms of our statewide government, the Governor Little, the Lieutenant Governor Bedke, the Attorney General Raul Labrador, all of our congressional delegation, is that it? Is that who? All those folks have all come out against Prop 1, right?
I've been impressed, honestly, with the unity in the Republican Party for this. Almost every Republican office holder in Idaho has come out against it. There's a handful who are remaining neutral, such as the Secretary of State.
Oh, we lose Brian there.
Explicitly in favor. No, I'm still here. Are you there?
Okay.
I can only think of two off the top of my head who are explicitly in favor of Prop 1, and that's Representative Lanting and Senator Hartgen, both of them who lost their primary races. So I think they kind of might have ulterior motives, possibly, potentially, allegedly. And most of the other Republicans they have on board in order to give it a bipartisan veneer are, Republicans from the past. Governor Otter and, the former Attorney General, Chief Justice Jim Jones. I remember at a policy forum a year ago, before this was called Prop 1, when it was just, they were still calling it the Open Primaries Initiative, which, of course, is a lie. Several people, including Jim Jones, said that the point of this is to break the stranglehold that Dorothy Moon has on Idaho politics. And that's news to anybody who's on the right, that Dorothy Moon has a stranglehold on Idaho politics. I think some people might wish that was the case, but it's obviously not. We have a robust system within the Republican Party. We have people, on quite a wide spectrum, and voters make their choice. In some places, they vote for somebody who's perhaps more moderate. In some places, they vote for someone who's more conservative. Nevertheless, like you said, we have, our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, our entire congressional delegation, 90%, 95% of our legislature, Republican legislators, are opposed to this. So can you think of any other issue where Brad Little and Scott Bedke and Dorothy Moon and Raul Labrador and Brian Lenny and Jim Guthrie are all on the same page? It's pretty rare. So in this case, I think it's important for people to listen up and say, okay, wait a second, what's this about?
Yeah, and Representative Young, I feel like there's been this drumbeat, of this term rhino, for almost 10 years now, for a long time, when it comes to folks who are, who've read the tea leaves and feel like, okay, if you're going to run for politics in Idaho and you're outside of, maybe a handful of districts, that you need to register and run as a Republican, even if you don't really abide by the party platform. And does this sort of, I'm reading the language in Prop 1 here, and it says that candidates could list any affiliation. We have this graphic here. Let's pull it up. Candidates could list any affiliation on the ballot, but would not represent political parties and need not be associated with the party they name. It's under there in green. So to say that they could affiliate on the ballot, but would not actually represent that party, what are we telling people, Representative? What does that tell people if you're not a member of the party?
To me, it basically this proposition has the intended effect of completely neutering the role of political parties in the elections process. As I was getting ready for today, I thought, I remember this was monstrously long. I'm going to pull it back out. So I sat down with my 9-year-old, and he had to make tick marks so we could keep track of how many sections there were, how many were new, and how many were amended. 18 pages, Matt. 18 pages, 42 sections. 34 of those are amending existing statute sections, 8 new sections. It dramatically changes the role of political parties in the election process in the state of Idaho and essentially neuters those parties. I think we do voters a great disservice when we take away from them the ability to have these general political ideological contests between parties. And that is what this is doing. It's pulling the rug out from under voters, something that gives them a little bit of a basis to know where to start when they look at candidates. And this would completely remove that. It's enormous.
Yeah. Kate, I want to ask you, I might put you on the spot here, but it's kind of a challenge, okay? Because and this could be for everybody. George Washington, in his famous farewell address said, "Be careful of the parties, right? Of affiliating with parties." Is this trying to be in line with that, or what do you think? I mean, where are we today with political parties and the right of people to assemble under a united ideology or a united worldview?
I agree. It's definitely a right to assemble and have a belief system. And really similarly to what Representative Young was saying, there's an ideology that is followed in our political parties. And, in many cases, you have to look at what the platform says, not necessarily at the individual person, right? And I know, especially with President Trump, this is a major point of conversation with people. It's what are the policies and what effect on other people are those policies going to have? And I think our political party system defines that as well as it can. And there can always be outliers within a political party, but it does give voters an idea of, okay, what policies am I supporting, at least in theory, if I vote for this candidate? And unfortunately, as we know, those platforms, those party platforms, are getting more and more different all the time. And so I think it is important for people to be able to look at a platform, look at a party and their specific ideologies, and know that in theory, that is hopefully what you're going to get as far as policy decisions that are going to have an effect on the population.
Yeah, that's great. Brian, what's your take on that?
Well, I think there's been a movement, and it's a long-term movement in our country toward more individualization. You go back hundreds of years, and we had numerous levels of organization, the family, the church, the community, and those are kind of being broken down so that we're all individuals, and our major relationship is with the government, with the bureaucracy. And I think this is along those lines, because we formed political parties as people who are united, not on everything, but on a lot of major issues, so that we can work together and exponentially increase our power together. There's strength in numbers. And that's what parties have been since the beginning. It's not a bad word. Partisan politics is not a bad thing. And even though George Washington was not a fan of it, his cabinet was, and that's where we got political parties. John Adams and Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, and each one had a different idea of how things should be, and they gathered supporters to build strength, and that became our political parties. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's one of those things that we used to have in the society. Associations of like-minded people. If you take that away, that actually takes away from the ability of voters to make an informed decision. People will be even more at the mercy of whoever has the most money to send the most mailers or the most text messages or put the most TV commercials up. It actually benefits the political establishment, or the ones who have all the money behind them, rather than giving more power to the people, which they say is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and when you take a look at the Sunshine Reports and you see that the yes on one just pulled in another $1 million to spend in these final 2 weeks of the election, it really highlights the point you just made there. Okay, so Representative Young, you're in Blackfoot, you're out there in East Idaho. What is the sentiment on the ground? What does it look like out on? Are people out there door knocking? What is your take? What is the experience so far that you've taken out there?
Yeah, I do know that they're door knocking. I think most of us have probably received some text messages and some mail. Certainly, one of the stories that I thought was interesting that I got from a constituent in the last week, they called me and said, "Hey, I have this nice 30-some odd person knocking doors in our neighborhood, and when this young lady talked to me, her big push was that this was a financially responsible thing to do." And I was so confused because when I look at what's involved in this, just in the setup, like we talked about at the beginning, but then in any kind of attempt to keep things transparent and fair and make sure they happen the way they should, we're talking, I think, hundreds of thousands of dollars for sure by the time we're done. It's crazy that anybody would push this as financially responsible. Just that alone is a big red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to go back to your earlier point, if you're a legislator running and you have, 3 or 4 counties that you cover and each county is counting themselves, by themselves, they have to wait until the other county finishes their first round before they move on. And we're talking hours, days. I mean, it already takes a day or so sometimes because a lot of these rural counties that have ballots outstanding and coming in. So to think that this is that this is more financially responsible is ridiculous. And I think, Brian, isn't it true that Secretary of State Phil McGrain came out and said that it would cost maybe upwards of $40 million across the state to implement something like this?
Yeah, he said it could be between 25 and 40 million, whereas the statement on the initiative, the text itself says, a couple $100,000. My guess is that they just copied that verbatim from Alaska, where Alaska just has one election system, whereas Idaho has 44 separate election systems, and they didn't even think about the fact that it would require changing those systems in every single county, even tiny counties that have barely any infrastructure. It makes me wonder if, whether consciously or subconsciously, there's a push here to centralize Idaho's elections. Because you're going to run into, if this passes, you'll run into problems where some of the smaller counties just can't handle it. And so they're going to have to offload it to the state, and the legislature might be forced to come in and centralize it. And I don't think that would be a good thing.
Yeah. One of the other lies I want to ask you guys about is this mailer. The mailer went out across the state that claimed that this Prop 1 would return Idaho to an open primary system as if it was before 2011 when the Republican Party elected to close their primary. I'll start with you, Representative. Is that true? Would Prop 1 just bring us right back to those open primaries before 2011?
I didn't run for office before 2011, but what I can see when I look at just the legislation itself, the proposition, I guess I should call it, that long, amending 42 sections of code, this is a ground-shaking, fundamental shift in the way that we do elections. This is not just turning the clock back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely not. Kate, what is your take on that? I mean, is this really about an open primary? Because when I think of an open primary, I think of showing up and picking which party's nomination process you want to partake in. But is that what we're getting here?
No, I think ranked choice voting is something completely different, and that's what this is. And, again, like we've all experienced these lies essentially that are being told. I mean, that's why it is so important for everyone to be armed with the truth about this, so you can clearly communicate it, and so that you're not going to be duped by someone telling you that duly elected officials have been appointed, right? So I think, I think that's what is important to note here, is that everyone understand this. And yeah, unfortunately, it's a very long proposition to read and understand, but it's important to get the word out about what it actually means. And it's not open primaries.
Yeah. Brian, what's your answer to that?
Well, if you go to gemstatechronicle.com, one of my most recent articles, I think it was Friday, I go into a bit of the history of this. I did a forum with Senator Nichols over the weekend and dove into this. Idaho's been changing its elections every couple of years, going all the way back to statehood. And in the 1970s, they settled on an open primary, which is where you have parties, but any voter can go in and request any ballot. I could feel like voting for the Republicans one day. The next year, I could do the Democrats. A year after that, I could do the Libertarian ballot if I really wanted to. The Republican Party in the late 2000s decided to close the primary and say only affiliated Republicans can vote. And they actually had to go to court to get that implemented. The state was trying to say that you don't have the right to do that because we pay for, taxpayers pay for primaries, therefore we have to keep them open. But they went to court. The court ruled that freedom of association means that as a private organization, the Republican Party can decide who can vote in their primary. And that's the case. That's the way it's been for the last 12 years now. And it just means that you have to go and affiliate as a Republican. It's not hard if you're independent or unaffiliated and you really want to vote in this year's Republican primary. You can just go and literally tell them as you're checking in, I want to be a Republican this year. And it just affiliates you as a Republican. And then you get the Republican ballot vote. You can unaffiliate the next day. Maybe that's not the sort of person we necessarily want voting in Republican primaries, but people have that right. So they're trying to say that this just restores it to the way it was prior to 2011, when that's not the case at all. It's going to implement a jungle primary where every candidate, Republican.
Oh, we must have lost Brian there. Well, we'll try and get him back. He was summing up his great point there very succinctly. So I thank Brian for that. Hopefully we'll get him back. Let's I want to end this on a good note here, ladies. I'm feeling pretty confident that this will be defeated at the ballot box, but I want to ask you folks. I mean, you're the one, you have constituents, you've got friends and neighbors and stuff. And what are you seeing out there? So, Kate, I'll turn to you. What's your sentiment? What do you think is going to happen?
I agree with you. I think the fact that, as was discussed before, that Republicans are really united on this issue, I think that helps a lot. And I agree. Anyone I talk to who is actually familiar with this issue and is aware of the facts of this issue and not the misinformation that's out there about it is understanding this to be a horrible thing for our state. And so I agree with you. I am positive about this, and I hope that is true in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, and Representative Young, how about yourself? Are you optimistic about this?
I am. I would echo what Kate says about the importance of the unity that has been among the Republican Party on this issue, but I also think we can't take anything for granted. Yes. And there is a lot of misinformation out there, so I really appreciate you working hard to get the information out there and help folks understand.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to let you guys go. We're going to encourage folks to early vote. We're going to encourage folks to return their ballot and, of course, show up on Election Day on November 5th and stay informed and share these messages. I know if you folks are out there with newsletters or sharing information that you continue to do so. So thank you so much for joining us, ladies.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Let's watch this ranked choice voting informational video. This kind of highlights a little bit of the issue here. We've shown it before, but just to refresh your memory, let's take a quick break while we watch this video, and we'll be right back.
Would you still head to the polls if you knew that your vote was just going to get thrown in the trash? Of course not. Which is exactly why you need to know the truth about ranked choice voting. Also known as instant runoff voting, ranked choice voting destroys everything we know about free and fair elections. Unlike a traditional election, each voter is expected to vote for every listed candidate in order of preference. Also, unlike a traditional election where the candidate with the most votes wins, a candidate must have a majority of votes to win. If there's no majority winner in the first round, the losing candidate is eliminated. The people who voted for the loser in the first round then have their second choice votes counted in the next round. This process continues until there is finally a majority winner. The problem is that thousands of votes are trashed along the way to create this supposed majority. These voters weren't willing to vote against their conscience, so their votes are gone. These voters got confused and filled out their ballots incorrectly, So their votes are gone too. And these folks ended up casting votes for candidates they never would have voted for otherwise. The result is that a much smaller manufactured pool of voters ultimately decides the election, to the exclusion of thousands of other voters. Any system that throws out legitimate votes and requires voters to vote against their conscience is problem enough. But ranked choice voting almost always ends in extreme partisan victory for the left. It's a far cry from the ideal that gives every voter a voice and a vote that matters. This scheme undermines the integrity of our elections, and it must be rejected.
The Foundation for Government Accountability, FGA, we appreciate their hard work on this issue. Really good folks over there. Folks, I wanted to share before we get off the air here, I wanted to share with you some really exciting news. And that is, if you've been watching our Twitter feed, our X feed, you know that that I was out at the Kootenai County election office here in my county, in Kootenai County. And last week was the first week of early voting up here, and there were over 4,000 people showed up to vote. There was 1,017 on the first day, over 1,000 on the second. There was just under 1,000 on Thursday, and then the week ended with 1,059 people showing up. And then yesterday, which is the second week of early voting in Kootenai County, but the first week in other counties across the state, we had 1,400 people show up. So the biggest day ever this year so far in Kootenai County, which also has seen the largest increase in early voting participation in ever. So, but I do want to share this graph with you. This is Ada County. So this is our largest county. Look at this chart. We pulled this chart this morning, and let me get my glasses here real quick, because this is the in-person early voting ballots cast. So at this point in 2020, 2016, 2012, and we even included the 2024 primary from this year, but at 14 days before Election Day, you can see here how many people are showing up in person to vote. And now, again, this is Ada County. And so right now, 2024 is trending way, way high when you compare it to 2020. Now, of course, you have to take into account COVID with in-person voting. But 2020 in-person voting did outpace 2016. So there weren't too many people that were worried about showing up in November 2020 here in Idaho to vote in person. But certainly now you can see the energy level is extraordinarily high for turnout in early voting, in-person early voting. Also we have another graph here. Let's see if we can go back a slide. This is the rate of return for absentee ballots. And if you go back one more slide, let's look at how many were issued. In 2020, again, the COVID year, you can see at this by Election Day, there were over 140,000 ballots sent out mail-in. 2024 is trending to be the second highest when compared to 2012 and 2016. But on the return side, now we can go forward a slide there. On the return side, so far, 14 days in, we are trending below 2020 numbers and below 2012 numbers. And so, folks, if you are out there with a ballot on your kitchen table, you got to return it. You got to return that ballot. Or surrender it, or do whatever you need to do to go in and cast your vote. So we are super excited about that early voting number that we see up here, that I see up here in Ada County. I'm sorry, in Kootenai County, and what we're seeing down there in Ada County as well. Brian Allman was on earlier with us, and he, I don't know if he said this on the air, but we were talking beforehand, and he was out at the Eagle Library. Again, he's a library trustee. He was out at the Eagle Library doing some meetings there, and the line was out the door this morning for early voting. So we've seen reports across the country about early voting, breaking records in states like Arizona and Georgia, and not only breaking records, but seeing the Republicans outperform what they normally have. And so that's a really good sign. And I hope as long as we can see, you got a shot of our producer there, I think, as long as we can see conservatives turnout this election, we might have a chance at also defeating Prop 1. But you got to stay informed, and so you got to share these episodes. You got to share that video that we just sent. And one other thing before we go, Dorothy Moon was mentioned, and she was on our previous special on Prop 1, but. And this is a fascinating video because she was on Steve Bannon, his War Room show about a year ago. I think it was about a year ago. And it's fascinating to watch this because to see where we are now, and especially with the fact that Steve Bannon is currently in prison, wrongfully imprisoned. But let's watch this. Let's watch this 2-minute clip.
I hear a rumor. The way that they try to dilute MAGA and try to take these states like Alaska. Sarah Palin would be in the Congress as a firebrand, and we have more votes in Congress except for ranked choice voting. Right. I'm hearing rumors they're trying to put ranked choice voting in Idaho, but I thought you guys defeated it like a year ago.
We did.
So, but what's happening? Why? Because this is the way that they make sure there's never a MAGA candidate.
You're right. And I'll tell you what, after we were at the Orange County meeting last year that Mike Lindell ran at for chair, the party passed a resolution stating that we wanted to encourage states to pass law or to amend their constitutions to not allow ranked choice voting. And we did that. And I was very pleased that before I even went to Orange County, the Idaho State Central Committee had already passed a resolution to do the same. So now we had the state, we had the nationally, all the Republicans wanted to get rid of ranked choice voting. And I think the minute Idaho, who used to rank seventh as the most conservative, seventh conservative state in the nation.
Seventh?
We were seventh, now we're 23. That's a whole different episode.
Well,
but anyway.
Hang on, man. There are too many people coming in from the Bay Area.
And COVID. We had a long lockdown and a lot of federal money coming to Idaho. And so I think that's what brought us down to 23.
Not good.
No, it wasn't good. But anyway, once this ranked choice voting law passed and was signed into law, then all of a sudden the left immediately put their eyes on Idaho and decided that they need to push ranked choice voting. There's an initiative right now. They're out gathering signatures, and they're going to have it on the 24 November ballot.
Wow.
And should it pass?
There's going to be a referendum on the state referendum?
Yes. And not only for the ranked choice voting, but also to open our primary. We currently have a closed primary.
Yeah, so fascinating. Credit to Dorothy Moon for being on top of this, and to all of you folks out there watching as well. I do want to make sure that we get some more reaction across the state. So if you've been watching and you have some anecdotes, or you want to challenge anything or ask a question or anything, we're going to throw up a URL here. It's speak.idahosignal.com. And if you go to that, it will redirect you into the lobby here, and you can come on camera with your microphone as well, and tell us your experience. What has, if you've had door knockers come to you for Proposition 1, if you've been out and about talking with friends or family, or you've been stopped in the grocery store to discuss Prop 1, or also, if you truly believe that we are going to go back to an open primary system as it was prior to 2011, and you're kind of mystified at what you heard today on the program, please call in and let's dive in a little bit and see if we can't get you to understand exactly what this proposition is all about. So we're going to leave that channel open for a while as we go through a couple of the other issues here. One of the things I did want to highlight again, and we talked about this on the program already, was this ballot scenario where I got a few cards. Let me just jump to this point. I got a few cards here. As I was going through all this stuff, it's like a madhouse, right? But let's say there's 4 people on the ballot, and after the first round, this was the count. You had Bruce pulling in 47%. You had Chucky pulling in 46%. Freddie at 4%, and Lizzie at 3%. Okay. Let's say now after the first round here, nobody got 50%. So you'd have to eliminate Lizzie and say, well, Lizzie doesn't get any more votes. So then they would look at all of Lizzie's ballots and say, well, what was Lizzie's voters what were their second choice, and then they would distribute among the others here. Now, this begs the question, of course, is that if all of Lizzie's goes to Bruce, then maybe Bruce wins, or if it gets distributed to Freddie and then Chucky, and we're still under 50%, and then you got to eliminate the next person. It doesn't look as though Freddie has a particular chance here, but this might be the scenario where Lizzie at the end of the day says, "Well, should I have been eliminated? I was only within a percentage point here. What happened? Maybe Freddie should have been eliminated, and then Freddie's tally went somewhere else, went to some other candidate. And then Chucky, of course, being just 1% away from Bruce during the first round, could say, well, maybe he wants to challenge what these. I mean, what are the rules? What are the laws? I've read through this this bill, and most of this stuff is left up to the county clerk to figure out how to go through it. And we already showed you the ballot from before. What if somebody marks the second choice twice? Does this ballot even exist anymore? Should it exist? Should it exist? Call in. Answer these questions for me. I'm happy to hear the discussion. There was also this talk about, if you do an audit, let's say you have to do a statewide recount audit of the gubernatorial election where we're electing the governor. So if this thing passes and then in 2026, we have 4 people in a ranked choice voting ballot, and if you take 2022's numbers, you had 592,000 ballots cast in 2022 for governor. What if the same amount shows up and then an audit needs to happen or a recount? And this is a ranked choice voting, and every county has all their own ballots, and they're all going to have to do it and recount, because it's ranked choice voting. So it's not just doing an audit to see if there's any discrepancy. You have to eliminate ballots and then add them back in. It's not that it's confusing. It's just convoluted. There's so many different steps. There's so many areas of pitfalls that you could fall into. And then of course there's just the idea that, should you do an audit, how long would it take? Normally an audit can sometimes take a few days to go through and double check the ballots. How long is it going to take to do an entire statewide recount of a ranked choice voting? It could take months. Actually months. It's unbelievable. Okay. We are asking you again. We tried this once before. We had somebody come on. It was really great. But, I get it. You don't want to come on live. That's fine. But the channel's open. You can't say I didn't ask people to come on and either debate or just tell us your experience. One of the last thing that I kind of want to cover here is when you fill out the ballot, this language here, which we actually, I don't need to hold it up because we've got it here, the one that's all underlined. This is the language that's on the ballot. And those are the two, we can drop the lower banner there. Those are the two, drop the whole, there you go. Those are the two points that are on your ballot. So I encourage you, when you go to vote, read this portion, which says that the first thing that this measure will do, because it proposes 2 distinct changes, is it will abolish the Idaho party primaries. And let's stop right there. I thought this was instituting open primaries, but the language here says abolish Idaho's party primaries. So which is it? Well, it's let's get rid of the party primaries. Under the current law, political parties nominate candidates through the primary elections. This initiative creates a system where all the candidates participate. So make sure you're reading this and understand and then rectify that against what people are telling you at the door, what they're telling you in your mail, what they're telling you on the radio ads that are out there. Oh my God, they cringe every time I hear them. I'm like, ridiculous. And then the second part, let's make sure we can see the second part down there. This measure would would require a ranked choice voting system. Now, the yes people, they're not walking around crowing about that. They're not using that on their billboards. You know, I drive by some of the elites property, the elite property owners in my county. I drive by their property and they've got yes on one, and it's all about open primaries, which it clearly isn't. But you've got some answering to do. I mean, these are lies. These are flat out lies, and you're lying to the people, and it's really sad. It's really sad. I've said worse on X, but it's really sad. All right, folks, I gave you all the opportunity to chime in, but I guess you're going to have to take me on Facebook or any of the other places we can do that. I thank you for watching. Again, we got 14 days left till the election. Please go out and early vote. You can see the counties where you can do early voting, in-person early voting. It's scrolling down there on the bottom. Make sure you head out to your election office and cast your vote. Bank your vote early. Another thing on a national scale is I find it interesting that President Trump has been doing rallies in places like California and New York, places where electorally he's not going to win, but maybe he's making a push for the popular vote, which means that your vote in Idaho will contribute to that popular vote too. So if you're a Trump voter, get out there and vote, and make sure you're educated on Prop 1 as well. So, all right, folks, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I thank Kate Hartley, Representative Young, and Brian Allman for joining us. And keep in touch with us on social media. IdahoSignal.com is where you can go support the program. And let's just keep doing it, folks. Let's just keep doing it. Get out there or encourage everybody to vote. Find somebody who needs a ride. That's the one thing you can do. Find somebody who needs a ride to vote, and go do that. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back some other time. Take care. Bye-bye.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.